Welcome, Senthil.
Hey Bhavin, nice to see you.
Good to have you here. Senthil is one of my previous managers. We have worked together in Rippling. Senthil is a senior engineering leader in Rippling currently, and he has worked with multiple other companies and startups, notably with Simple, which is a payment processing company in India. And his latest role was VP engineering over there. Welcome to the podcast. Let's talk about software growth today, Senthil. But before we dive in, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I will talk about software engineer growth journey, more than software growth. My personal introduction, I'm primarily a software engineer. I love coding. I love building things. I love designing architecture. That's me personally. I started as a software engineer long ago, in 2006 in Satyam, and then like ThoughtWorks, I spent a lot of time. I tried my own startup journey for a brief while. Then Simple, I was head of engineering for three and a half years. Then I joined Rippling. Yeah, so in Rippling, I was running the platform team, shared services, bunch of infrastructure platform related teams. And then now I moved on to a different role in which like mostly things related to ML infrastructure and things like that. So that's my journey. Uh, yeah, I love building things, and that's my primary identity.
Awesome. So you were a manager before, and you're back to a senior IC role now. You would have seen a lot of growth patterns and growth anti-patterns on your way in your career. What are some of the things that come to your mind when we talk about software growth?
So you're talking about like as an engineer, like how do you grow that growth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think essentially I will say the software engineering growth in my own career, and I've also seen it like overall is about like the kind of level of abstraction that you handle. Like when I joined, I think as anybody joins, the first thing is that okay, can you click the button, and the moment you click the button, like whether it works, that the pop-up shows or like stores in the database. That's the level of abstraction that we handle. And I'm sure like somebody grows and then they are like thinking about architecting a large system, like you're designing India stack and you're designing some large workflow system, or like you're like CTO of a company which builds like a large platform and it's like used by millions of people. So the growth is basically essentially the abstraction at which like you handle and how much you can make sense of it. I think that's what growth is about. Like, and as the general growth is about like the more and more abstract it gets, and more it feels like you're growing there.
Nice. So that's a good summary. You need to be able to take stories and take features and understand how to put the basic building blocks together. This is typically covered in the initial college and the initial years of a software engineer's career.
I think most of the essential aspects of like scaling up the abstraction is actually not taught formally anywhere. Like I almost like split this thing into like just for the my own understanding and just for the way to bring some attention, I use the term called industrial engineering. That like okay, you can like you learn software engineering in your college, like you probably know how to build a web app. Like people know that today, but that's just a one aspect of software engineering. But like what you're building in a large company is that like with few hundred engineers, or like even if it could be like a small setup to like it's like 50 engineers or 10 engineers, whatever it is, like you're actually building a system which is not like the way you build like a typical software that you are generally individually done in your college and in small groups. Like you want to do it something different. It has real money, real users. So industrial engineering is generally not taught as a formal thing ever in college, and you learn as a part of your job. It's like pretty much every company has its own flavor, and every team has its own flavor. So people learn from all these things, and they have some rough idea of it.
If
Gone.
you're saying there are multiple flavors of industrial engineering and you don't learn it in the college, then two specific questions are: how did you end up learning it? Was it on the job, and was it from good seniors who like did they convey it to you? Was it taught to you while you were on the job, or did you just pick it up passively?
Both happen. I think actively, what you do is what you learn, right? Like what you hear, you know, what you see, you know a little bit, but like what you do is what you learn. For me personally, what I learned most of the things from by doing, from imbibing from different colleagues and different, especially experienced people's uh, insights, like and then how they approach the problems. And it's also by, okay, if this problem is there, and it might be actually very tempting to say we are facing the first unique problem in the world. Like when I wrote my first statement, I thought like I did like something amazing, but like it's such a thing, like everybody does the same thing. So it might be also a little bit uh like, because like we start with like some amount of like creative spirit to the job, but most times you are actually doing imbibing ideas from different places, being some things are done that same way. So if you just go like search for it, I'm sure you'll be able to find similar patterns existed in like some part of the world, and so you have more opportunity to learn through the internet from other people. Personally, for me, when I was at ThoughtWorks, see, ThoughtWorks was a consulting company, and that like it had like hundreds of teams, and they are like all technologies, and like they're working with all kinds of clients, all kinds of projects, all kinds of scale. So there is a developer mailing list that used to exist in which like all the topics are discussed, and with literally like no filtering because it's within the same company. So you got to see like really large problems being discussed and like extremely deeply with very passionate individuals, and that actually provided me like a bunch of recipes that I can use later in my life as part of Autodesk and also outside and like till today. So and it also just kind of introduced me to people like Martin Fowler, which helped me to learn a bunch of conceptually like how to do that.
Awesome. And if you're saying there are multiple flavors of the industrial engineering and doing it right, there must be some fundamental principles that apply across all companies. So let's talk about the parts which are less situation specific and more general, which applies to everybody. In other words, like there are definitely ingredients which are beyond the interview process, right? You
Understood.
prepare something for the interviews, but industrial engineering is way beyond that. So
Yeah.
what's going on there?
Yeah. I think the software engineering interview process is actually, for that matter, any interview process checks for things that are like clearly unbiased, in an unbiased way, objectively what you could prove it within that limited time. And only those things are like picked for the interview. There are many other things that are outside that, like that makes us engineer really successful. That like you just like you have limited time, and also it can be like can have a lot of biases. So you just kind of try to remove it, and you are just trying to create a small mimicking of the actual work in a limited time. That's what software engineer interview process is. So it has its own shortcomings, but you whatever you prepare for interview is not whatever you prepare for your next project. Like you are not preparing some lead code for to solve a problem for your next project, right? Like most times you're thinking about something else. Um, so now what is common across good engineering or like industrial engineering practices that help a company move forward? So if you have to take that, and that's a vast topic, and I can put like few thoughts. How you gather your requirements? Is it like going to be like too structured, unstructured? Is it going to be like data driven or not? Like things like that. And you do it in different ways in a like as a company grows, right? Like when you have a million users, you're not going to change the things without experiment. Like you're going to do some A/B test and like you're going to figure out some insight from it. But in your like when you have like hardly few engineers and like hardly few customers, you're going to okay, some hypothesis, you're just going to release it and see how it operates, right? Like so thinking about like starting with the requirements, how you do design in terms of like whether what kind of like data modeling, domain-driven design, and things like that. Then how are you going to do testing? And they are actually go testing and development actually go together like that. It's not like a separate testing phase. Typically, like how you write code, how you test code, how you going to release that, like how often you release that, and then like how you going to measure whether it's successful or not, and how you gonna uh monitor it, like literally like you released it, whether it is producing intended effects for the business or not. So these are like you understood the user from there, and then like you made some changes to user's life, how you are going to measure it. So all the phases of it, and software engineers are supposed to be involved in like from top to bottom, like the entire thing. It's not like requirement gathering for product managers and releasing is for like your SRE team. It is not testing is for some bunch of QAs out there, and it's not designing is for some architect team. I mean, that's not the way. Like especially in startups, like you are like full stack from top to bottom. Full stack is not just like tech backend and front end. It's like full stack from user what he thought he or she wanted till what he or she got.
Yeah. So you talked about two major aspects. One is the technical depth, which is all things technical. Whether you understand the language, whether you understand the architecture, the process, the tooling, etc. And there are nuances to it. And second was more on the managerial side, which involves people.
Right.
You have to deal with people, you have to deal with processes, and you have to deal with yourself, because many a times you yourself get in the way of doing the right things. Let's separate
Right.
those two, and let's expand on the tech part first, or maybe whichever one you prefer. Let's take one either from tech or from management, and let's double click and unravel some of the things there.
Right. So I think, yeah. So I mean, it's the same thing to software engineering growth. Coming back to the topic, I think it is about that, like expanding your abstraction levels, and it has like two aspects as you said, like some managerial aspect, like how 10 people are gonna work together when you have no project, and then like how the architects are gonna fit in with all these 10 people, 10 components being developed, and how they're gonna interact with each other, and how they're gonna how we're gonna release it. That's like technical aspects of it. So it's gonna at every abstraction level, it has its own set of like managerial and a technical kind of thing going on always, and most of the time they are also intertwined. Like, will you consider CTO as a people person or a tech person? They are both, and we are good engineering managers are actually both. So it cannot be like completely separate. Like for all people problems, you go to one person. All tech problems, you go to architect. In startups, especially, in my strong opinion, is that doesn't work, and we need like the intertwinedness to handle it, because
Yeah.
most software problems are not tech problems. These are all people problems. These are all team organization problems. This is all prioritization problem. This is all sometimes people emotional problems. Right? Somebody is angry with somebody, and then because of that, the API contract document is not yet released, and then like, because of that, like you're not doing API document, you're talking to a database directly. Like the architecture decision influenced by two people not talking to each other comfortably. Or like they are in a different time zone, and they think it's hard to work with their team because the collaboration is hard. So let me actually do it this way. Let me make some another round trip API call. And the Convoys law talks a lot about it, like how we organize the teams, the way architecture was like that. So it's generally intertwined.
What's Convoy's law?
Oh, the law is that the way you organize your teams, the architecture will evolve like that. For example, consider that like you're building some ticket booking website. You're going to have teams organized. You can also organize the teams like a booking team and payment team. You can also teams like a search team and a database team, a third-party integration team, and they will work differently. And now, if that is established, then the way they write code will evolve into that similar structure in code. And consider that like there is no search team. Everybody in their team will actually automatically they will talk to the database or do it. But if it's at the moment you put a search team, you will talk to API contract, and they will do something else differently, right? So the way you organize teams, the way architecture will evolve, and actually the inverse converse is also sometimes true. Typical idea is that like everybody wants to go fast. The one way to go fast is that like reducing cross-boundary communications. Now you will actually interestingly build things accordingly. So the architecture will evolve into that eventually. So that's Conway's law.
What is the right way of doing this?
Oh, there is no right way. So there is just no right way. It actually depends. For example, consider that like you are you're building a payment gateway solution. Like consider you're building a payment solution. Now, just for collecting repayments, you're gonna have some payment page in which like consider you run a simple like some credit card platform, in which like for collecting repayments, you will build some payment page in which people come there, click, and they repay, they show the balance and repay, right? Now, at some point, you might think that, okay, you want to show some advertisements there, like, because it's real estate, users come and you want to show some advertisements there. Now, at that point in time, it will be really fast to tell the repayments team, okay, you're also responsible for your real estate, and then you're supposed to actually create revenue through that, like by letting people click to it, or the shows like having a lot of impressions. So just pull some ads and then like show it. That's one way to think. Then you will probably not create like advertisement streams as a separate team, and you will part of it because that team will design accordingly and they will handle it because that's part of their KPI. But consider that the company has another long-term vision in which like, okay, there are multiple other vendors are asking for some advertisement service. Then what you will do probably is that like you will create advertisement service team, which the first customer will be internal, will be the repayment page team. And then you will also like kind of open it up to the world as it operates, right? Your architecture should not be creative. It should reflect your business 100% as much as possible. To make it easier to evolve the software because it's going to be more or less aligned to the business. Otherwise, you created like fake architecture, which is different from business. Then every time you need to translate it back to this and then like convey the limitations because of your own creativity to business. It's a pain. So you want to keep these things like pain that your software is like talking in business, and that's why like all this domain-driven design theory, like the importance behind is that like, okay, you're not inventing anything new. So yeah, the right answer, like if you have to say that, like there is no right answer as to like what's the right way. I think the right answer is probably almost equivalent of like align with your business, make your architecture, make your technology, make your API contracts, make your team structure, align with your business. That way, it'll be easier as the business changes.
Okay, awesome. So now let's tie this back to the growth of a software engineer. A couple of points that I read from this is that if you have to align your architecture with business, you have to have a basic understanding of the business to begin with. You cannot live in your technical silo and just build because somebody asked you to write a feature. There needs to be an appreciation of what are you writing this for and what is the end result going to be. There is definitely a wrong and a right way of doing this. Can you take an example? Like how would a wrong software engineer approach this situation versus what is the right way of looking at it?
Right. It's a great question. I'm trying to think of an example, but like let me start with like a common theme I found in engineers as I have been seeing, right? There are engineers who are like really interested in technology. Like if you ask them what did you do? Oh, I just made a JSON endpoint that will read and store into this, and it will use some LRU cache to make it faster and things like that.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's like really tech focused. Like they are like they breathe tech and they are very passionate about it. And they are in a business meeting, they are in requirement gathering. They're just looking for one thing, like what's going to be that like the tech aspect. They're not really looking at users and things like that. They're like really good at their craft. But I think what will also make it like very effective, and the other side, which is a little bit about which I think people evolve eventually as they grow, is that okay, that tech is as good as it can get, but without real user, it's solving real users' problem, you're not going to be really happy about like what you built, right? And that person is going to say, hey, it's not about like LRU cache being used or some Redis being used versus like not being used. It is about that like the page has to be faster so that it will. I mean, it's a very famous thing, right? Like the page becomes slower, people are going to drop off. More people going to use my application. That means like more revenue to the company, and I'm very effective to the company, and I'm very effective to the user. I don't waste users' time. So I think, and also like I mean, as a kind of like a side effect, is that like in your resume, if you're going to write really technical things versus like, okay, I solved a problem that brought like 2 million more revenue to my company. People are gonna just like surprisingly gonna be like really interested in having the conversations heard. Versus that, there was a query in which like I created like a couple of indexes and made the page faster. Okay, fine, that's less interesting.
Everybody does that, yeah.
Right. Everybody does that. Like, oh, indexing, yeah, of course, indexing will solve database performance, latency problems, speed problems. Okay, that makes sense. But like sometimes some features are justified. Technically, it might make no sense. Okay, there it is in 2 pages. Like, well, user can click this and click that, and it'll work. Like, why it has to be in the same page? It can be justified by the business, right? Like, okay, people are dropping off. If it is in same page, we see it improving. This is how you do it. Then it suddenly they're making sense. So coming back to the topic, it's basically that in terms of growth, you're more and more. You're not thinking in your silos. You're thinking in an abstraction level. The abstraction level is nothing but like somewhat related to the business abstraction levels.
You have to think about impact. Like that is one takeaway for sure. You cannot think about tech because tech you can just polish and polish for elegance to the end of having the elegance in the software. And second thing is you can improve the software until you have a reasonable impact improvement. You have reasonable enhancement in the impact. Beyond that, doing more technical polishing, it's worth thinking whether that is worth it or not. And people being good at their craft, and you talked about engineers being respected in their organizations, they are definitely good engineers, but they are also engineers who can put it in business context where they realize that, okay, this much engineering is going to impact the business positively. Beyond that, it's still good engineering, but it's not going to impact the business in a good way or in a meaningful way. And hence, it's not worth investing the time for.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's about like craft for the sake of craft versus like craft for the sake of profit, right? Craft for fun and profit. Like you can. And I think all of us in your personal projects, like you will do craft for the fun, like because like you're just like wake up in the morning, just like write something. Like it doesn't matter, but for you it has to look beautiful. It has to like really, it gives you the fun of it. That's fine. But I think good engineers also know like fun and profit, like that they know where to draw the line. They have to take trade-offs. Sometimes, oh, you just release this because like we don't even know it's gonna completely work. We'll just release this and like we'll figure it out. Like, okay, it's gonna be slow. We can optimize it later. But like the craftsman inside you might want to just go and like really make it perfect. But product engineer might have to think, okay, it's fine. Like let's release it. Let's get the feedback and improve it later. It's not gonna justify the cost, and it's a lot of judgment calls, a lot of trade-offs. But yeah, it's about like craftsman versus somebody like using the craft for the business.
So when you're doing your pet projects and you're doing these smaller projects, maybe you're learning a new technology and you want to do it like right, because the goal is to understand tech. The goal is to understand the nuances of what is possible and what is not possible in tech. But you're saying there is something beyond that, which is an essential ingredient in the growth of an engineer, which is that you have to understand tech, but then you have to understand the benefits that it brings. Not just the elegant side of it, but the benefit side of it.
Right. So, for example, you're writing a
like how do you do that in the personal projects? How does one learn that?
See, in the person, okay, so when I just like roughly defining what's personal projects is that something that you do, for example, the goal of personal, for example, there is a new technology, say some Phoenix framework, some new languages come, or like you're learning Haskell and functional programming, right?
Yeah.
Then you're not going to take any shock. Like the goal is to like for you to learn. The goal is to do the right way. Like how to not use side effect in something at all. Like I want to write something functionally. There is no side effect you want to create in the entire code base. Now, just for like remove one side effect, one print statement, or like some one thing, you might spend like 2 days to actually make that happen. And it gives you, wow, I found a way. Like you might have done some convoluted logic at times to make that happen. Because like your single goal is to like go pushing the limits of like what's possible with the framework, or like know what's possible at that point in time. But as a practical engineer, like you are working with somebody in a team, and like you have this has to like, and you see that you might take some shortcut. Okay, fine. I'm gonna just like take this like I want to just like write it into database where it is not required to be stored in database. It's fine. Instead of creating a proper JSON store, I'm going to just like put it into string and then like store it in the same column itself. Like works. And that's like very, very subjective to that thing. Like if I want to spend like 2 days to justify the clean code versus like 1 day to do that, or I can come and refactor. That's the beautiful thing about software. You can always refactor, come in eventually, right? So that's judgment call. And most of the time, it is a balance between like the deadlines that you have, uh, and like kind of the skill that you have on the particular tooling, whatever that you're, and also the context that you have. You kind of take a call between combine these things and make a trade-off. Personal project, like, okay, you still don't have, you can actually brush it up. Like you just like search more, find out more, read more, than do it. There is no deadline. And context is what you create. So these limitations doesn't exist in your personal project.
Okay, so you just put a very interesting ingredient on the table, which is the second piece for growth. The first one was that you have to be aware about the business and the business impact. The second one is that you're part of a team. You're not working alone. In your personal project, you're just coding alone, and the goal is to learn. But when you're on the job, more often than not, I mean, yes, there are one-member teams, but the 99.99% of the rest of the world operates in a larger team. And to be aware that you are part of a team, and that involves coordination, communication, agreeing, and democratically agreeing over the ideas, etc. So how does one improve on that? Because you can, like, sitting alone, you can't learn about team skills. So how does one become more successful in a team setting?
Yeah, don't be democratic. That's my advice. But anyway, keeping that. So
Too
don't
many
convince
cooks.
everybody. So just go on. The code that goes to production is the winning code, not a democratically chosen code. Anyway, keeping that aside, but I got the point of your question. Um, I think it's a very, very, very good point, and often underlooked, under articulated, like a missed skill is about like it's not about like what you in a team. Maybe it's not like entirely democracy. We don't decide by votes, but there's going to be definitely the conversations are about like context sharing and like making sure that the best idea definitely makes impact and is used for the business, right? So ability to articulate your ideas is the skill, and that skill is, to some extent, it is also interview skill, but more often it is slightly more than that, because in the interviews, like most of the context is not there. It's like very specific to some
Yeah, it's a micro
somewhat toy
problem
problem.
that you're solving. Yeah.
Right. And it's very, 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 very controlled, because like if it's too ambiguous, then there'll be biases, and no company designs the interview process to be ambiguous. They want to kind of reduce the surface of the ambiguity. But in business, in actual projects, there are more than one way to solve the entire problem. Sometimes you just change the requirement. Oh, technical. You just when writing the code, you discover that like, it's not possible, or it's going to take too much time. Then you literally change the requirement. Okay, it does not make such a big difference to the user, so let's just do this way. And then like they really insist, then we will figure it out later. So that's going to happen. So how you articulate the limitation in a quick way, and it needs some preparation. That's going to be a skill. Being open to, oftentimes I've also seen what gets there is that like people somehow, like we are all, oh, don't take it personal, is a very famous dialogue, which means that all of us are taking things personal, right? Like it's your feature, your code, like your thing. So you built a solution and somebody pokes a hole in it. It's very, especially in the initial years of career, it's very hard to accept it, because like we have been always, like since a childhood, it's always about like your personal, like individually you wrote an exam, you got individually a mark, like everything is done individually. Like, and when somebody points a mistake, it's actually the individual gets affected. Like your score goes down, right? Like that's how we have been trained all along. But in a team setup, you are like, the five people have one goal, that like make sure that the user is successful or the business is successful. So when somebody points a hole, they're not point there. It might not affect you. It's not about like finding. It's going to affect you like directly, as if like your credibility goes down or something. But most people take it that way. But a good software engineer has to learn a skill of like how to utilize everybody's experience and knowledge, and right, and how to articulate it. The third aspect is also very interesting. People are going to always say, "Hey, from my experience, is the right solution." Like now, you just cannot like just like somebody cannot use their experience to justify this is the right solution. It feels like that, right? And as you grow more in experience, this is what you'll say. Okay, sometimes you'll feel this is not right, but you cannot say from my experience this is the wrong solution. I mean, that's the stupidest way to
Yeah.
be there, because like many things might change. So how, as you grow, how you articulate and how you keep it very tight grip to the reality is going to matter, and that needs practice. And practice not in terms of like just sitting there and sitting isolated and just talking about it, but it's about like when somebody brings a problem, you feel something that is not right, and sometimes you may not be like able to think on the foot and say that, but you can actually like think more about it and then like come back and say, uh, and that way it will become useful later, right? So when the similar things will crop up again, like you'll be able to articulate much clearly why it doesn't work, and somebody can poke in the assumption that you had, and then like your understanding gets further refined. Okay, this solution worked with these conditions, but that condition is removed now, and because of the solution, no more works. So ability to articulate, ability to not convert into software beliefs rather than like software facts. Uh, those are the skills.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you talked about that people should not be attached to the solutions that they are building and rather be objective. If you get too attached, then you're trying to defend yourself through your earlier habits, but what you're actually doing is you're pulling your team down, and you're preventing your team from building a better solution, and hence you're setting yourself up for failure because you're part of the team. So let's say people lose that, and this is like a mindset that's relatively easier to get rid of. And now you're thinking about just software as a whole and a team as a whole, and you want to make your software better. You cannot be emotional about it. Although
Right.
emotions can be a good starting point, many a times we all operate from our experience. So many a times it will start with that hunch that this doesn't have the right feel to it. That's okay to have. If I read you correctly, you are saying that hunch is okay to have, but that cannot be your end game. You cannot state your position just on the basis of the hunch that in my experience this was not right, or this doesn't feel right, because others have no possible way to look into your experience until you articulate it, and
Yeah.
hence there is no way for them to improve it. How do people actually improve on this articulation? So that's a specific question to you now.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's like I think it's just like literally impossible to be like unemotional towards like like not passionate about like what you're building, and like I mean we are not AI, like we are human beings, so we just cannot build things like that. But I think the way to think about this is that like be aware of that emotion. I think that's important. And also, like instead of latching on to the specific line of code and specific solution, you
Yeah.
can be latching on to that, like, oh, like I want the specific outcome. Now I'm going to utilize everybody's here to help you. A team is here to help you. A team has no different aim than like make you successful and make your company successful. The politics is a different game. Like it doesn't exist, or it exists a different thing. But like point is that like it's overall I think you can latch on to higher goal. That will be helpful. That you can be passionate about. Like user definitely has to solve the problem, and we should do it in the shortest time. Those are like everybody agrees that goal. My solution has to be the only solution. That's a wrong way to be
No,
associated
so
with.
that's
So
fine.
I think
So that's the business centricity that
yeah.
you're talking about, and thinking about the user, thinking about the impact. I'm actually talking about the communication gap
No,
that
I'm coming
people.
there. I'm coming there.
Huh.
So I think the point that like it feels like a right or wrong in your opinion, but you don't have a way to articulate it. That feeling has happened to me. I'm sure the feeling has happened to multiple other people. many times you might not be able to come up with a correct fact or a good example or good articulation on the meeting, on the discussion, on the foot. Like you may not be able to explain. Somebody say, why is it wrong? It feels wrong is enough at that point in time, but many times it's just you will not be able to go beyond that. Um, so at that point in time, what can you do? This is what I have done. I've said it doesn't feel right, but I'm not able to clearly clearly say why it is wrong. What's the downside of it?
Yeah.
Can we discuss this tomorrow? Sometimes some discussions can wait. Can we discuss this like later today or tomorrow? And I've actually paid some deep thinking about it. And most times, if you sleep on it and wake up, and you're going to actually find the actual articulation. Sometimes you might be wrong. So it's absolutely fine if you can afford it. If you cannot afford it, if there is a place in which digestion has to be taken, if you're the if you if you think this is fine to get started, you might have to just be okay with it. That okay, we might have to discover it doesn't feel right. And I've been really, really frank about it. Hey, it doesn't feel right, but I don't know why it is wrong. So we should. But I'm okay to do it. It's just because I don't justify. I've been like this frank, and
See, so this is
and many
just in
times I
the
have to
this is just in the
go on.
situation that you're talking about, that you are in a discussion and you have this emotional trigger that this doesn't feel right. One way is to postpone it. Maybe you can be transparent with your team, saying that
Yeah,
this is what I feel. I'm not able to articulate it, but this is what I feel, and maybe they'll be able to probe you back with some questions.
yeah,
Maybe
I
they'll
mean,
be
that's
clear.
what I've done. Yeah, so they'll probe. Sometimes it also happens that like there are a couple of other people who feel the same but who are not. I also don't feel like I also don't think. I also don't think. Then somebody will say, "Hey, I also initially thought like that," but then my reason behind that is that they're gonna actually give you some more hints to why they thought and why they changed. Then it's gonna actually pop it back, and then it's gonna be a conversation. But the sincere thing would be that like be clear about this, like instead of like being this is instead of saying that it's a stupid idea, just say that like I'm not able to poke hole in the idea, but it doesn't feel right.
Right. So clarity definitely has its place, and we'll get to that back in a minute. But what I also hear you say that you have to be comfortable being vulnerable in front of your team. An excellent point, right? That I feel emotionally that this doesn't feel right, and not all things can be clear, right? There will be things which are at the edge of your knowledge boundary. You will be unclear about it, and if multiple other people are also unclear about it, it just helps saying that out, and maybe the team will discover the clarity together. Maybe you alone cannot discover it together. So being in part of the team and being vulnerable in front of your team actually goes a long way. This was within the design discussion. Let's consider a person who is struggling with this for a long time. There are various experiential knowledge pieces that they have from their past experience, and they have this um, emotional stance of what is right or wrong, but they are never able to articulate it. Postponing by one day, etc., doesn't help, and they are just not able to break that ceiling. How do they go about it? Like, how do you develop this fundamental skill of technical articulation? Does it go back to like lack of clarity, or can it also be that people are clear but they are not able to articulate? So it's not a technical like lack of clarity, but it's just the articulation problem. Or can it be both as well?
It can be both. I'll put the. I mean, I can only talk about like few things, right? For example, if people are not comfortable talking in their team because they are not emotionally connected to the team yet, or they have a fear of being ridiculed, that's a bad culture of a team, right? Like, okay, if I say something wrong, somebody's gonna actually like put me on the spot sometime, and then I'm gonna feel bad. I mean, that's about the psychological safety of the team, and that's part of mostly it's cultural within the team or within the company a lot of the time. So that's a problem by itself. And if you're especially leading a team, you should make sure that irrespective of the background, irrespective of anything, irrespective of people feel comfortable to voice their thought. I think that that's a necessity for everybody, a responsibility for everybody in the team. And I mean, there are like endless study about like why psychological safety is like very much important for the team's well-being and productivity and long term, and then people sticking together and things like that. It's a responsibility of everybody. For the leader of the team, it's like far more responsible. I mean, I think the culture of the team is the top number one priority for the leader. Beyond, like I would put it even about delivery, like that they need to make sure that the culture of the team is like they feel people are feeling psychologically safe. And naturally, other things will be side effect of it, like no healthy conversations, like great delivery, speed, people helping each other. All those things. I mean, the people sticking together longer. All those things will be a natural side effect of it. So I would put that as a priority. So that's at the team level, but as an individual level, uh, I can just talk about like to how to develop the skill maybe. I can I
Sure.
think it is about practice and practice only. Fortunately for today, you should just like this, like you should whatever works, right? Like some people arrive clarity by like searching and searching and talking to multiple people. Some people get to clarity by writing it down. Like literally, they're just trying to write down. And people draw. I've seen some people trying to draw mind map, and then like they actually find to the terminal node in which like why they are stuck with something. So whatever the practice that helps them, they need to identify. Like it might not be just the time might not be helpful. But if they also believe at some point, oh, it's a bad practice, and that's how I learned. Beyond that, I am never asked why it's a bad practice. It's fine, accept it. And maybe it's a time to learn why it's a bad practice. The situations might have changed. What is considered a bad practice is no more a bad practice now because something in the framework has changed, something with the things have changed. So you might be able to change your opinion yourself.
Got it. So people can try writing things down, in a way, journal things, and or just try scribbling the solutions, and that will give you more clarity. Rubber duck debugging also comes to mind, where you can just try talking to a rubber duck, and just by talking to it, an inanimate object, you'll get more clarity. These are individual efforts to become better at communication. How in a team setting can one become, how can one leverage the team to become more clear with their thoughts? For example, using someone as sounding board, or even finding a mentor, just articulating your problem of, ironically, the problem of articulation. If you can just say that, maybe someone will, maybe your manager,
Yeah.
mentor will be able to help you. So how can they leverage the team?
Yeah, see, I think sometimes teams work. Like, you discuss within a team and then it has happened to, I mean, I'm sure it happened to you, to me, like multiple places. Like, okay, there is a team discussion. Now the team is thinking about a solution to the problem we are discussing. And at the end of the day, you are just like, going back home with one of your teammate and then like you're discussing about it. Suddenly you get say a completely different idea. Right? Like, and then like, oh, that looks like a solution. Like, you get a like real right kind of like thought for articulating the problem, right? Kind of uh, like example to explain the problem better, and that like that puts that brings clarity. So that can happen, and it sometimes it can be sometimes many times it can be beneficial to have somebody else totally different, and then you're just calling and talking to them, and then like while talking itself you actually get a solution because like you're articulating to a person who has no context, and then like it actually helps you to sort of rubber duck thing you're talking about, but yeah, human also helps. So people need to find their own way, and there is no one solution. In my opinion, there's no one solution. Sometimes after all these things, also you still not articulate it. Yeah, it happens for some small set of problems. We might have just accepted things, and we might have just believed that's the right way to do. And now it's a time to learn a new way to do. Uh,
Got it. Um, Also, there are very genius, very geeky engineers who almost refrain from communicating with the team, even when they are part of a very healthy team. And the team doesn't have any cultural issues per se, but people, because they are introverts themselves, or because of other reasons, they choose to, actively refrain from mingling with the team, spending like non-technical, non-work time with the team to bond with them. How healthy is that from the growth perspective? How hard is it to grow while you're not talking to people? And is that a good thing or a neutral thing at least? Or is that actually a bad thing? And there is some real value in, building those connects because it allows you to be more vulnerable. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's I think uh it's very hard to say in this aspect because I've seen a lot of different examples. As long as you're able to, like, if you're introvert now, like basically I don't want to interact with this team, like I don't want to talk to the team. Because of that, if your work is going to be impacted, for example, you're going to take some, you think something is a good solution, but oh, talking to all these people, it's gonna take more time to convince all these people, but I'll just go with whatever they are saying because it will get approved very quickly. Sure. But it's sort of a disservice. It's to your skill and to the business. You, I mean, all of us have some responsibility in terms of making sure that like our personal biases don't impact our professional output as much as possible. Like, and it can go the long way, right? Like, for example, you had a bad fight at home, you came to work, and can it affect your professional output? Like, typically, sometimes do, but your intention is generally that, like, okay, you're going to keep this thing separate, so you're going to be like, keep it professional and make sure that, like, uh, it like your mental state doesn't impact. And many times it's actually beneficial to come out of the that bias. So as long as people take it positively in terms of like their own biases, like to talk to people, not to talk to people, or to be like, okay, the other way also can happen, by the way, right? Like, okay, you're too friendly with the team. Because of that, like you might be okay with like you're very friendly that like what you think is right, but that will but just because you want to be friends, like you're going with some substandard solution, like something that you don't agree, right? Like that can also happen. Like if you're like too extrovert and you want to just go with the team's flow. So I would say, like, irrespective of it, I've not seen being an introvert or extrovert has a significant impact on the overall career growth. But if that being introvert or extrovert has impact on your ability to be impactful to the business, if you let it that level, it will have it will have some impact. Because you might take some substandard decisions at times, and you are not in your best, like you are not given your 100% best to your professional outcome. So that will naturally have some impact.
Got it. Yeah, so those are
Just to be explicit,
yeah.
I don't think that like being with a team, joining there, all the parties should be need for your professional growth. I don't recommend personally. I think it's up to people, and as long as like okay, it doesn't matter whether you joined the party the previous night or joined all the nights before. This is not like as long as you can be comfortable with the team to discuss and solve issues.
Right. So as long as you have that connect with the team, beyond that, it doesn't matter. But if you don't have the connect, then you utilizing these events, whether it's a proper party or it's just a Zoom call where everybody is coming and playing some games or having chit chats. If you
It
can use
helps. It
that
helps.
to build the connects, it helps.
Yeah,
Got
it
it.
helps. And sometimes people, I've also seen some colleagues have their own way. Like people are really good with some people are not good with like some like a large team setting. Like they don't like certain things, but like they could be right. They build bonding with like close colleagues through personal things. Like sometimes people just like make phone calls and talk and like just go for a movie together. There are always to build the bonding. There are always to feel comfortable in a team, and whatever works for you works for you. And
Got it. So, as ingredients of growth, we have talked about two major things till now. First is the business and the impact centricity, and second is the skill of communication, where you're able to articulate your technical ideas clearly and how to improve them. The third question, which I have for you, is uh, balancing between good design and impactful design. versus not accumulating tech debt. So one thing is to like have your knob completely dialed towards clean designs and very, very elegant solutions, and supposedly you will not have any tech debt, although that is debatable. Another way is to completely focus on the impact, business impact, and just do impact driven software. Both are wrong. Like, both extremes are clearly wrong, because if you're purely impact driven, you are going to have this nightmare of a software piece to maintain, because you have accumulated too much tech debt in terms of in the name of going fast or etc. How does one balance between good tech versus good business solutions?
Yeah, I think this debate that will be debated in every team, and there will be no answer to that. But this is how I thought all the time. See, debt, like in a business, debt is unavoidable, right? You just cannot avoid. Like, you just need to take debt so that like you can sell your product today and like make some profit, pay back the debt, and then like make a larger debt and then like do something more. So
Mhm.
debt is as a standard term is it's part of the business, and we all build business. So the software is nothing but like what makes the business run. So it's unavoidable. It is reasonable to have debt. There's nothing wrong about it. It's part of the business. And second thing is that like how I think most people there is no discussion in terms of I think the conversation becomes more in terms of like Puritan like software craftsmanship discussion that oh no tech debt is a great thing. I think we need to talk debt from a business perspective. So for a business, how do you quantify debt is going to have a significant impact of like how much debt in what areas you can have. So now, how do you quantify debt? Like that I think that's what people should talk about. And there are ways to think about it. One way to think about is that okay, I'm let's take like not having test coverage as a debt. Like because basically what it makes is that why we call it debt there because it actually makes any change to that costlier, right? It's basically like you just go make a change, you are more prone to fail, like you are more prone to break the existing things, which means you will be super cautious not to break, which means that like you will feel constrained. That means that you will move slow. Consider a robust test suit with that. You'll be able to just edit it, run the test. So, oh, that's failing, just go. But if it is nothing is there and can break, what will you do? Right. So that's I mean, so let's take that, right? Now, if we take that, consider that a product is not, that particular feature is not being used at all for long. And then a couple of users are using it, and there's going to be less change. The cost of the debt is like very less versus the critical piece. Yeah, repay. Yeah, like I'll just say that like customers payment page, like people drop off there versus like your FAQ page, like one of the FAQ is misaligned, and or it is like adding one more FAQ is like a long process. It's okay. So I think people, if we could actually quantify debt to a large extent, we may not be able to quantify in dollar terms all the time, but we might be able to quantify in terms of large, t-shirt size thing, like, okay, it's a larger debt. That area is having, okay. So everybody has the tech debt wall. People have some cards and some stories or like some things identified as debt.
Yeah.
Try to quantify it, right? Okay, yeah, like for example, not upgrading to say your Python version has a larger debt, like, one more security issue patch you've not applied, it can have less. So there's some amount of judgment involved as while assigning the size to the debt. But as long as overall you agree towards a common framework of assigning the debt, you will be able to prioritize and pay off as the thing happen. Uh,
So
so
you're
I would
talking
say,
about so you're talking about
yeah, go on.
not quantifying debt, but more importantly, quantifying the interest that you'll have to pay. If it's an interest-free debt, because it's a feature that is not being developed, or code that is not seeing any changes, or a feature that sees very less number of users, it's okay. You're not paying any interest on that debt.
Some debts are like insurance. There's like for example, if you don't have insurance, somebody might think it's a huge risk. Somebody might think, okay, next month if I take it also it's okay because like I may not die. So so there's some amount of judgment is involved. Uh, so for example, like not upgrading your Python version, right? Okay, if you're in the oldest version, like Python 2, like where nobody's supporting and it's very hard to make any changes, the debt size is really high. But you are just like couple of patch versions behind, your debt size is less. So you can only measure this relatively. Like you cannot like put this thing like in absolute dollar numbers most of the times. But between like if you have a tech debt bunch of cards like identified, most times you will be able to say what's the topmost one, what's the top five based on the impact and make decisions. And some of the things are judgmental. Like you will see that, oh, okay, fine. The new framework or like new thing will solve this problem anyway. So I'm okay to live with it for next 6 months. So it's
Because the debt
very
is going to
subjective.
just get paid through other means and it will just disappear anyways.
Yeah.
Senthil, but there are
Yeah.
other ways to quantify, right? Yes, we might not be able to quantify the debt in dollar terms, but what are some of the other units? What I have in my mind is, for example, the time wasted of the team to service the debt. So are you paying in terms of your bandwidth? Are you paying in terms of reduced user experience and user inconvenience, whoever your users are, either end users or developers if you're a platform team, or their business
So,
users? Yeah. So what are some of these
right.
currencies that you can measure the interest payments in?
I think so how often that area okay, so you can actually measure this. You can also like kind of like have some overall guidance value in terms of, oh, this area is like more or less stable. Nobody touched it in like last 6 months. And that doesn't have test suit, but it's fine. Like, and it's never going to be tested for next 6 months also. You probably tend to value it less. But there is an active area in which like it's changing like so frequently. And every time somebody touches, like they're going to take more time because they have a fear of not breaking it. Uh, and the second kind of like corollary to that is that like, what's the cost of break? For example, consider you're running you're running a, say again like some say ticket booking platform. Somebody is not able to, when they add snacks and then it is not able to, they click on the increment button, it doesn't work for some reason, versus like the payment page is broken. Now this will have like entirely different business use case, like reduced user experience, reduced revenue itself, right? Like sometimes. So you need to value in terms of like, okay, whether this page is going to be is like a critical flow for the business, how often the page is going through change, like how many, which means that like how often people need to waste their time to be careful and feel constrained to make change. Those will be like kind of ways to gauge like how overall compare the tech debts.
Yeah, it's a
Like the
probabilistic.
entire
It's a
yeah
probabilistic thing, right? I mean, let's say
yeah
old language version. Just to go back to that example, you might have a security breach, because there is a 0-day vulnerability that gets discovered in the future, and you get exploited, and the cost is very very high, but the probability is low. The question is that if that low probability occurs, and uh, in that event, what is the like business cost that you're going to pay? Is your business going to collapse completely because you lose your brand value and you lose your face in the market? Probably not worth living with. Like you should patch it.
yeah
But an inconvenience which is wasting, let's say, your team's time, you're spending, let's say, 10 man days more every month because of this tech debt. Um, uh, Either you like, so okay, you're spending 10 man days like every month, but fixing it is going to require 50 man days. Do
yeah
you invest it right now? Because there is an opportunity cost as well. So you're saying just taking a holistic view of these things, it might not be easy to quantify all the time, but people should strive to build mental models. Just tying this
yeah
back to the growth journey, that you should have mental models about what is good to do, versus not good to do it. Doesn't matter if you're on an EM track or not. Even if you are an engineer, you'll become a staff engineer one day, and being able to take these calls and have a quality conversation with a leader goes a long way in your growth journey.
Yeah, yeah, and this is to some extent judgment also plays a role, and that's why I'm trying to be like cautious about like as if like there is a golden solution. I'll give you, for example, like let's take this patch version or like some security course. Like every code base might have some one or two other things. Like no, sometimes
Yeah.
like something is there, some architecturally some things are there. Now nobody prioritized it because people thought the probability is less, right? Probability is definitely less. People thought like the impact is somewhat critical, but like won't bring down the company also. That's fine. But suddenly, one day, one exploit happened, and it kind of put the team on embarrassment. It still doesn't bring down the business. And now suddenly everybody wants, okay, we will fix all the things together because the second embarrassment suddenly became like extremely costly. Right? Like, okay, you have consider somebody leaked, like they like somewhere passwords are checked. Like it's a very poor example, but like to make it like extremely simple so that we can understand it.
Yeah.
Somewhere consider that like password, like people are using shared credentials or like passwords were checked in or like something like that. Consider that like one incident happened, okay? And suddenly the entire team will feel focused, and sometimes the entire company feel focused to just like go fix all the things, clean up the entire thing, like remove all the check password, rotate all the passwords, all those things become possible, which might you might have to prioritize if the incident didn't happen. You get what I'm saying? So we are like the prioritization might change. The okay, cost of first incident is low or
Yeah.
like medium. The second instance is like super critical. So you want to completely make it zero. So it is not like a standard, oh, that is gone. Like, no, it's not like a standard thing that exists. Like, and also people become emotional towards certain things and fix it. So it's all judgment call eventually.
Right. So basically, there are some mistakes that are worth avoiding completely. For example, like tasting poison. There is no going back. You can't do that. So there are some things which are absolute, no compromise sort of things, and you should understand those to grow as an engineer. Because if you commit those mistakes, it's going to be quite costly for your career. And those are like, frankly, they're easy to learn, easy to because there is no judgment involved. It's wrong, like, right? And everybody agrees that it's wrong. But beyond that, there are things which are opinionated, and there are apples and oranges. Somebody can like something, and
Yeah.
it's good to understand the flavors.
Yeah, I mean, as you just like continuing from your example, most times we don't know whether it is poison or like poison-like. It'll just make me like faint for like 5 minutes. So people don't know. People are like all red and blue bottles exist. Somebody drank something. Somebody like, oh man, all those things are poison. Let's just go attack it right now. Let's kill them all of it. Versus like, oh, you thought you'll only faint, but something bad happened, so you might prioritize accordingly. So it's all some amount of judgment is always there.
Just to extend that analogy further to the risk of beating it to the death, you can also have slow poisons, which are much harder to identify, and that's where the most successful people in the software craft, they are successful because they are good at identifying slow poison. Design decisions, architectural decisions, team organization decisions that might seem correct or close to correct today, but they are going to be a disaster after 2 years. And you'll only discover it 18 months into that decision that, oh, this was a wrong decision. But now there is no going back, or the cost of actually mending that decision is very, very costly, very, very high. And the more you can understand the deeper layers of what are the dynamics and the interplay between the architecture and the team structure and the communication, and finding that sweet spot between the business impact and building a system and maintaining it, I think that is going to take you a much longer way than just knowing how to build like clean software.
Right. I think it's also happened because like somebody joined a new team and they have like some other way to see the problem, and then they say, oh, this is like, okay, you guys are living with this, it's stupid, like you should change it. Many times it happens because the new people have new perspectives, and slow poison people are something we all get used to it, and the other person, oh guys, stop this. That happens.
Awesome. So now to conclude the conversation, what are the 3 top suggestions that you would give to listeners to help in their growth journey?
Always, okay, I think like kind of you can summarize the overall aspects of it. So
Yeah.
two, three aspects. One is that like your growth is essentially the abstraction in which you handle the problem. Like, are you just handling, well, first you start with story and then like feature and then like, and then a project and then like go on. It just keeps going up. Like, so just keep trying to expand your the horizon, the abstraction layer, so that like the growth will naturally happen. Most times you're already handling it, that's why you're given that the role, right? Like you're moving from senior engineer to staff engineer because like you're able to think beyond feature, you're able to think little more. That's why you're already thinking. So your growth will happen generally because you're already progress in that direction. The formal recognition follows later. So keep looking for expanding your thing. The second aspect is that like the skills that you brought for one layer of solutioning or like one layer of abstraction are not going to be the same skills for the next level of abstraction. If you're building at a story level, then like how you manage yourself, like how fast you write code and those kind of skills. But if you're going little above that, like how you organize your epic into stories, how you going to organize sequencing them, or like all those things becomes like a skill, and that's not the exact skill that you practice in the previous level of abstraction. So you need to build that. So so be aware that like you need to keep learning new skills. And one of the new skills that you talk about is that like articulation of issues and articulation of like your ideas in a much crisp way, much like convincing way everybody can understand. Um, third is sort of like not specific. Your growth is also subject to the surroundings. You cannot isolatedly grow. Like you're not immune to your environment. Yeah, a company which is growing, a company has great engineers, a team that is like growing really fast, or a startup that is growing fast. Like if you are being that, like you tend to experience far more new problems, larger problems. So that's going to be more vacuum for you to go and fill and expand yourself. Whereas in a place that is not there, you cannot expand because there is no vacuum. Like you're already connected, right? So those are like, if you're limited to three, I will say three here.
Awesome. I'll take out one that really popped out to me personally, that you're a human and you're not a robot. So you cannot discount your emotional side. Don't try doing that, or it'll be a different sort of a disaster. All you have to do is understand your emotions and work with them and make them your advantage. Because getting rid of them is definitely not advantageous. You're leaving a very, very positive side behind. With that, I think this
Right.
was one hell of a conversation on growth. And thank you for expanding onto those, Senthil. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Bhavin. It was lovely having conversation on this. Thank you.